Previously on Fun, Food, and Travel.
Filipino town, Los Angeles, California. We can see the LA skyline in the middle. That top building is the library tower where that helicopter's flying through. When we started dating, like 10 years ago, we were debating whether or not who was gonna move where. Like if I was gonna go from Philly to LA or she was gonna go LA to Philly. We actually met because of the film thing, because I did the Pirates movie, which was like the biggest thing I ever did. And they picked 12 of us in LA and moved us to the Caribbean for 6 weeks.
Since I had never been to LA or California, I came out to see her for her going away party and ran into Erwin on the beach.
Yeah. Fast forward 10 years and then here we are. Yep. Cool. Size. I think the last time I was in one was probably 10 years old. It seems so much bigger, but brings back a lot of memories. It smells like a jeepney too. It smells that diesel.
Tour is this mural. It's called Gintong Kasaysayan, Gintong Pamana, which translates, it's Tagalog, which translates glorious history, a glorious legacy. Kind of depicts Filipino and Filipino-American history, you know, in like chronological order left to right. So if we start far left right here, we can kind of see the background of Spanish colonization of the Philippines, right? Ancient Filipinos came from the Malaysian Peninsula and they settled down in what is the Philippine Islands today. And then in the 15 or 1600s, Magellan and the Spanish discovered it. The Philippines was colonized for basically 400 years by the Spanish. And it influenced like our culture in like so many different ways, both good and both bad, right? In the Spanish-American War in the 1800s, essentially what happened was the Spanish relinquished control of the Philippines, but transferred ownership to the United States. So there really was not this like period of independence that the Philippines had until after World War II. So during that time, there was the Philippine-American War, and we have a lot of Filipino heroes like Jose Rizal, who was like the intellectual and academic who really spurred the Philippines to yearn for independence. You have Emilio Aguinaldo, who's right there holding the Philippine flag. He was the first president of the Philippines and was also like a leader in the Revolutionary War. And of course, right here, there are many other Filipino historical figures like Gabriela Silong, who was also part of the Philippine-American War, right? And the Revolution. And as we move along through the mural, right here, you can see the first contact that we know of was actually in Louisiana. Filipinos were in Louisiana in 1763. And there was a Manila village in Louisiana. I didn't know that. I thought we only came in after the 1950s or 60s or whatever. But in reality, we've actually been here for the longest time, because a lot of our people who came from the Philippines were often, workers, right? They worked in the fisheries, the factories, the farmlands. And so you can kind of see that. I like to highlight up here, Carlos Bulosan. Folks familiar with the novel America's in the Heart? It was a novel written about his experiences as a farm worker during the Great Depression and the kind of discrimination and racism that he faced as a Filipino farm worker in the United States during that time. So it's a very powerful novel. I recommend that, you read it to really get a sense of that history. I also would like to highlight Francisco Guiado. He was actually a Filipino boxer nicknamed Pancho Villa, who pioneered the southpaw stance, and how, boxers, they're kind of used to hold their fist Popeye style and box like this.
He had a sad story though, where he
did?
died.
Oh, I'm not familiar, Edwin, if you want to share it.
Yeah, well, it was Wikipedia. I think they said he was the first Filipino flyweight champion or something like that. And then I think he had like a tooth pain or something. So he went to the dentist and they extracted some teeth. He was okay for a couple of days, but then it got infected. So then he went back. I think it was here in Los Angeles, and then he ended up dying at the age of 23.
So, and then we'll move on right here. Victoria Draves. She was an Olympic medalist for the United States. She was a Filipina swimmer. And as we move further along, we get into the more contemporary history, right? One of the biggest things that kind of impacted Filipino migration to the United States was the Immigration and Nationality Act in the 60s, which removed quotas. So before, you can only get a number of people from certain countries. But with that act, it was passed in the 60s, there were no more limits. So people could come in to live in the United States. So that's how a lot of Filipinos today, like our community, were able to come, right? But of course, before that, there were also a lot of migrant farm workers, like Larry Itliong, who I mentioned earlier, Pete Velasco, Andy Imutan, who are all part of the group called the Manongs, right? In Delano, California, which is in the Central Valley, a little bit up north. They fought alongside Cesar Chavez, right? For better working conditions and better wages for the farm workers. They were considered one of the fathers of the West Coast labor movement. The very famous grape strike that happened in 1965, that ran for about 5 years until 1970 to fight for their right. So we have a rich history of, Filipinos standing up and fighting for what's right.